Good morning, it's October 7th. This is To My Liberal Friends. The left wing of the Democratic Party is out in force in cities across the country attempting to confront immigration, customs, and enforcement officials. In blue cities across America, especially Portland and Chicago, violent protesters have attempted to surround ICE facilities to stop these federal officers from performing their duties. Now, before we go any further, we should all remember that during the Biden administration, some 10 million people were permitted to cross the border illegally. They were not checked for criminal records or health records. They simply turned themselves in, with the exception of the gotaways, and were released into the country. No questions asked. Democrats and the rest of the liberals in this country, the media included, did not object to this total disregard to the law. But now there is some form of enforcement. They're all hell-bent on obstructing those that are charged with enforcing the law. They showed no care about allowing millions of people to be sent to cities and counties where they overwhelmed the social services, spiked crime, and took over emergency rooms and local schools. Cities like New York were housing them in hotels and spending billions of dollars on immigrants to the cost of services to citizens in the city that needed those monies. ICE has repeatedly presented data that shows in the current rounds of deportations, it is concentrating on removing either criminals here illegally or those that have already been a court order for deportation. Read that again. The court has ordered them deported. That is between 70 and 90% of all current apprehensions. But that does not matter to the thugs who are besieging government facilities. These left-wing nut jobs oppose all deportations, even those that are criminals and have been ordered by court to be removed from the country. This put elected official Democrats in a pickle. They can read the polls and know the public wants both secure borders and criminal illegals deported. It was one of the major issues in the election last year. The open border policy of the Biden and Democrats was roundly rejected by voters. But Democrat officials feel that if street thugs like Antifa can surround ICE facilities in places like Portland, then somehow deportations will stop. They hope they can regain political power and issue a de facto amnesty for these millions, moving them to some form of citizenship and eventually Democratic voters. That's their game plan. The result is they do not enforce the law when these thugs attack federal law enforcement facilities and officers. In Chicago, they surrounded an ICE vehicle with 10 cars and forced these law enforcement officials to fire upon them. A female protester who was armed with a semi-automatic rifle was wounded. She had rammed her car into an ICE vehicle. She was later apprehended and charged. She's been doxing ICE agents so as to threaten them and their families. On social media, she made the following post, quote, "Hey, to all my gang, let's F these mother effers up. Don't let them take anyone," end quote. Does that sound like somebody you want out there in your neighborhood? And she's a citizen. On this incident, the Chicago police were told to stand down and not assist the federal officers. The Chicago Police Union called it a dereliction of duty. The radio message sent out said, quote, "Please, Chief of Patrol, no units will respond to this as related from 04 October. Caller is one of approximately 30 armed patrol agents who are being surrounded at large by a crowd requesting CPD," end quote. So where does that put us, these standoffs? The superintendent of the Chicago Police came out and said, "Oh, we didn't do that. That's a mistake." But you can't deny what you heard on the call. You can't deny what was shown on the computer. Well, America for almost 200 years has decided in formal law and court rulings that no local or state entity can disrupt the enforcement of federal laws or usurp federal powers. To do so would unravel the system of laws in place. Portland and Chicago believe they're more moral than the federal government and thus have a natural right to side with the street mobs by not enforcing their own laws against Antifa and other mobs who commit violence, and thus they ignore the protection and civil rights of ICE personnel. When you see these protesters throwing stuff at cars, throwing chemicals at them, throwing orange canisters at them. Now, if they did that to Chicago police cars, do you think they'd be arrested? You're damn right they would be. The same in Portland. But Democrats are fine with all of this. They think the violence against ICE will be portrayed daily as general chaos and not violence by their friends in the media. Then they expect the people who are not affected by the siege of federal facilities will blame those enforcing the law, not the ones breaking the law. That means the left-wing logic is to allow the violence to continue in a safe space for Antifa. Keep them all penned in and let them do what they want. ICE personnel will eventually, in their hopes, shut down and go away. The Democratic leaders in Oregon simply want to blame all of this on Trump. None of it's their fault. What these politicians in states like Oregon and Illinois seem to think is they are autonomous entities that are entitled to federal dollars when they want or need them, but they're not obligated to follow any federal laws they don't agree with. It's hard to know which is worse, the ANTIFA and other violent protesters who are trying to injure federal law enforcement officers, or the sanctimonious politicians who empower them to keep on doing what they're doing. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.